Nick Rekieta, had his, second settlement conference today. Now, hey, look, before I get into it, you're not going to hear me make fun of the guy for having a settlement conference in and of itself. Lord knows I got my own problems. But he had his settlement conference today, and this morning someone decided to DM me and just start telling me all of this insider information. Apparently, Nick just likes DMing with strangers on the internet, and I kind of felt bad when I was hearing this stuff. Because this is just a guy that's apparently talked to Nick a few times. They're not like close friends or anything like that. Nick just so badly needs people to talk to that he vents to strangers online. This is really, really weird. And this guy sent me a bunch of stuff and said, I thought you would be interested in this. Some of it I can talk about on the show. Some of it I can't. We're going to set it up with the news from today, and then we'll get to the gossip that I've received. That does include our former co-host and my ex-wife, the lovely and talented April Anderson, who, by the way, 3 more days turns 30 years old. April, 30 years old in 3 days. Doesn't look a day over 26, by God. Nick had his settlement conference today, and it seems as though it's looking like a guilty plea. There is a plea hearing scheduled for January 25th, and I believe the plea hearing will be a confirmation of the deal they came to today. Now, people have been theorizing for a long time now what took him so long, what took Nick so long to plead guilty. I did get some insight into that today from this inside source who will remain nameless. I feel like such an intrepid journalist. But in reality, this shit all fell into my lap. So here's what I know. What I know is here's what I know from this source. What I know from this source is there is no confirmation of which charges are sticking and which charges are staying. What he's pleading guilty to and what they're taking off the table. That information I do not have. But I do have information that it's looking like 2 to 3 years without drugs or alcohol. Now, 2 to 3 years without drugs or alcohol for someone who is addicted is... I was talking to a recovering alcoholic today, and they said, you know, are they getting help? Are they acknowledging that they have an addiction? Like, no, quite the opposite. And they're like, they're not going to make it 2 or 3 years. People on probation for that long with that level of problem who don't address it, it just doesn't work. You got to change. Otherwise, you're going to fail. Because not only are you addicted to that substance, but you now also have the added pressure of there's probably going to be a stayed prison sentence or a stayed jail sentence attached to you not using these things. So now there's the added pressure of if I touch this, I everything. People think that that's a deterrent. I think that's more like staring at the left side of the road going, don't go left into the ditch, don't go left into the ditch. And then your mind just kind of steers towards the ditch. But everybody's different. So this inside source that's spoken to Nick Rekieta told me, they said, it's like the way, like people take such glee in knowing this shit sometimes. Like, do you want to know what he proposed to the prosecutors? And I'm like, oh boy. And like, I'm just like, I don't feel bad for Nick because it's like, stop spewing all this personal, private shit to strangers. You're going to f yourself. So he goes and he pitches the idea. I want to read this so I have it right. I want to read it right from the horse's mouth here. Now, Nick says, hey, not doing drugs or not drinking for a few years is easy. You just don't do it. I don't have a problem. I don't have an addiction to alcohol. Now, I watched the guy personally for 5 months. He has a problem. He has a drinking problem. I would, in my opinion, observing his behavior, he's an alcoholic. He's addicted to it. He can think what he wants. I've had friends who are alcoholics. He behaves exactly like an alcoholic. So if you're not an alcoholic, the 2 to 3 years of probation, it should be, all right, well, look, them's the breaks. That sucks, but I got caught with my hand in the cookie jar. I'll take my lumps like a man. Apparently, Nick confused. Now, this is how it typically works. The state will offer you a deal, and there will be a first deal that won't be that great. And then as the process goes forward, they'll offer you a second deal, and that'll kind of be the final, like, look, we don't want to go to trial. It's time and energy and preparation. We got a lot of cases. Take this deal. Here's the, pieces of it. We'll call this thing good. Nick seemed to think that they were horse trading. And Nick brought forth an idea to prosecutors, again, from my source who claims to have direct contact with Nick. He said, quote, he tried offering to the state that he be a counselor, school visitor, and YouTube personality talking about the harms of taking drugs. Now, as far as being a school visitor, they don't want a guy who got caught with an ounce of cocaine with his kids in the house who's on probation for that crime going to schools and talking to children. They certainly don't need you to be a counselor. Just because you've done the shit doesn't mean you're qualified to be a counselor. So he offered this to the prosecutors, and I asked this person, why? Why did he offer it to them? He said he tried offering that to take the no booze for 2 to 3 years off the table. So Nick doesn't have a problem with alcohol. He's not an alcoholic, but he said, I'll change my entire YouTube personality to be the anti-drug guy. Nick says, I'm going to be the anti-drug guy on YouTube. You watch Nick Rekieta on YouTube, it's going to be a no doing drugs show. Drugs are bad, okay? I'm going to be the Mr. Mackey of YouTube and Rumble because I really, really need to drink. Now, why would they want you to go to schools and be online telling people not to abuse substances when the only reason you're doing it is so you can suck down a bottle of whiskey? I mean, when I heard that, I just went, people are like, do you think that's true? Do you think that's true? It's too retarded for somebody to just make up. It's just really too dumb for someone to just make up. So he offered to change his entire YouTube personality. And hey, guy, he thought he had, with Nick, it's all about these magic bullets. I've got this magic bullet that's going to get me out of all this shit. It was the Franks hearing, and then it was the interlocutory appeal, and it was this, and it was that. It was all this other stuff. Now it's, I know how I can, and again, none of this stuff is, I know how I can help people. I know how I can, steer people clear of drugs and everything else. His whole thing was, I know how I can drink. I know how I can get access to alcohol. I'll offer this. I'll go to schools. I'll be a counselor. I'll change my whole YouTube gimmick from the last time you saw me. I was to now the, hey kids, take it from me. Drugs are a no-no. Take a shot. I mean, I'd be insulted if I were the state of Minnesota to think that would work. So that apparently got nixed. That idea they did not think was a good one. Outside of that, my inside source has very little knowledge of what the deal could be other than kind of the time frame of probation, and that the probation is going to include both drugs and alcohol. That's what he knows, and that offer was made. And then somebody else told me that when Nick was negotiating with Rumble, he straight-faced told them, you should put me on your board of directors because I've got some great ideas. You got to give the guy credit. I mean, it's gall. It really is gall. So then he sent me some things about kind of the more personal end of this. And the more personal end of this looks like this. And I'm going to be careful here because there's things I can say and there's things I can't say. As I look, I'll try to read these. Talking about April, apparently someone gave Nick an ultimatum that said you can live the good Christian trad life or you can have your blonde whore. And he had to be put to a choice. And he could have chosen April. If he wanted her, he could have had her. He said no. He denied her. He rejected her. He said, No, thank you. So April has been denied. That's all got to go. That's all got to be finished because someone somewhere, whether it was a relative, friend, whatever, laid down the law and said it's either this or that. Now, my source also says with all of this situation, he's never held any of the cards. Other people have. I know she's your ex-wife, but I make no apologies. April, that silly didn't realize how much power she had. And then he said in a couple of sentences later, the man is broken. He says, I'm not going to share specifics, but I'll say he sounds like a lovesick teenager. It's sad to see. This isn't what he wants to do, but he wasn't given much of a choice. It turns out you bailed just in time. Well, I mean, it's not really what I'm worried about. And then I asked the person, I said, so he actually wants April. And my source says it's not just April. He wants whatever he wants. That was very interesting. So Nick was put to a decision by people. And it was, you gotta go with the whore or you gotta cut her loose. You gotta go with the side piece or you gotta cut her loose. And he told her, hit the bricks. That was apparently the choice. And his choice was she gotta go. And then he gets into the trying to offer to be a counselor, school visitor, and YouTube personality, talking about the harms of taking drugs. And he offered that so that they would let him drink while he was on probation. I believe that one because that lines up with the Nick I know. Nick has this idea that he's starting off on a higher intellectual plane than the other people who are laughing at him because, he thinks because he can't see their intellect, he must be on a higher plane. They're just up so much higher than him. He literally thought, he's like, well, I want to drink. So if I want to drink, I'll just offer them something. And because I'm offering them anything, they'll just give me what I want. They'll just give me my way because I'm offering something. And then if they say no, he chimps out and he goes, well, they're being unfair. I offered and they're just too stupid. And that was that comment he made not long ago where he's like, I just have to make the prosecution see and understand that it's just a waste of their time to... You can't be the guy who makes a YouTube personality about not taking drugs and talking to kids at schools when the whole reason you made the deal was so you could abuse substances like alcohol is a substance. So that was wild to hear. And then to hear that Nick kind of got tard wrangled, that's been a theory a lot of people had. And that turned out to be true. So that actually makes me feel not bad for April because she made her bed. But, like, now she's twisting in the wind. Now what the f*** is she going to do? Because, like, that house is sold. She's out. She's done. I don't know what you do from there. Hey, you know what the best part is? Not my pig, not my farm. Let's catch up with it. So that's the gossip I have for you guys. That's the inside scoop. Again, that came from someone who claims that they talked to Nick directly, and that's what they know. I will not reveal my source. As long as I didn't mention names, they said we could use that on the show.